Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Shevuot daf Yutet. We're going to get started from the bottom of Yud Chet Amabet. We had in the Mishnah machloka between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, and actually also Rabbi Ishmael appears there. I would like to look and start quickly with that machloka, and I want you to pay close attention to the words because we're going to have two completely different ways to understand. I would even say, is there a machloka between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? So if you go back to your Dalet Amabet, we have Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Hasheretz v'ne'elam mimenu. He darshans the juxtaposition of the word sheretz right before v'ne'elam, and says, from there, what do you learn? Al helim sheretz chayav ve'eno chayav al helim mikdash. You're chayav if you forget that you were tummy from a sheretz, but you're not chayav if you forget there was a mikdash. Rabbi Akiva Omer, v'ne'elam mimenu v'hu tameh. He looks at the next words in the pasuk. It's the connection of ne'elam and you forgot and tuma and not sheretz. And from there he says, you're chayav on helim tuma, you're not chayav on helim mikdash. And then just to remind you, which we'll get back to later today, in the daf, which is Rabbi Ishmael says, v'ne'elam shtei pamim. It says ne'elam in that pasuk. It says ne'elam in the next pasuk. He doesn't darshan them at all like the other people, and he actually disagrees completely with them. He says l'chayav al helim tuma ve'al helim mikdash. There's two extra words. You don't really need those words. Those words teach you helim tuma one, helim mikdash, and helim kodashim. So remember, because it didn't say in the pasuk helim mikdash, helim kodashim, and Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Eliezer both agree there is no Helim Mikdash or Helim Kodashim. You're not liable of korban for those things. Only Rabbi Ishmael thinks so, and that's how we started our Masechet with. Oh wait, this Mishnah doesn't match, right? Shtayim Shem Arba is not true according to Rabbi Akiva because, and also by the way, Rabbi Eliezer, because neither of them think there's Helim Tum and Helim. Neither of them think there's Helim Mikdash and Helim Kodashim. Now. The question is, do Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva disagree? They obviously agree that there's no Helim Mikdash and no Helim Kodashav, right? Kodashim. The question is, do they disagree about this sheretz thing? What does Rabbi Eliezer mean when he says sheretz? And for that, we saw that Rabbi Eliezer basically, according to Chizkiya, and then we said according to Ulla as well, he actually disagrees. And Rabbi Eliezer requires, and if we talk about a topic sentence for today's shiur, it's going to be, what type of knowledge did you need to have in the beginning? And I just want to remind you of a few things. In a regular korban chatat, like if I ate chalev, and I didn't remember that this was chalev, or I didn't remember chalev was forbidden, I have to bring a regular korban chatat. That's not the sliding scale, it's the regular one. I don't need any sort of knowledge. I didn't need to know that it was once chalev, and then I forgot, and then, no, if I didn't know it was chalev, and then I ate it, and then if someone tells me you ate it, it's chalev, then I'd have to bring a korban chatat. But in this specific case, because it says v'ne'elam, we learned, v'ne'elam means you forgot it, you knew it previously. So from there, they learn you have to have the yediyah. Now, what type of yediyah? So that's the machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Does it have to be that I knew exactly how I became tameh? And that's how they read when Rabbi Eliezer darshans sheretz. Oh, you have to know I was tameh by a sheretz or by an animal or however I became tameh. You have to know how you became tameh. That's critical. Okay? That's the way they understand it. And then I just want to go back for one quick minute before we go to our daf, which is we then brought that Ulla says the same thing, and that's because we quoted this Breita that Ulla quoted, where Rabbi Eliezer says, right, in a case of a regular korban chatat, he says, right, if they're not sure if they ate chalev or they ate notar, but in the end it's clear they ate one of them, okay, but they don't know which one they did, okay, you're going to be chayav a korban chatat, to which Rabbi Yoshua says, what do you mean? It says in the pasuk, "O hoda elav chatato asher chataba." I want to go back to this because we're going to get to this today. What does Rabbi Eliezer do with it? It says in a regular korban chatat, it says you have to know what you did. Asher chataba. You need to know exactly what sin you did, and therefore you're not going to be chayav if you're not sure whether you ate chalev or notar. You don't bring a korban, even though for sure you ate something that's going to obligate you karet if you did it intentionally. Here it was unintentional. So you have to bring a sin offering. But Rabbi Eliezer thinks, right, Rabbi Eliezer thinks you're going to be, and Rabbi Yeshua says, no, you have to know the chet asher chataba. You have to know exactly what sin you did. If you don't know what sin you did, no sacrifice. To which, right, they explain, and this is what Ulla explained, right, asher chatav evi is chet koshu, but in our pasuk it says, b'chol davar tameh, o b'nivlat sheretz tameh, because it goes through all those possibilities. What does it come to teach you? You have to know You have to know how you became impure. So there's a difference between, right? We're going to say specifically, right. Sorry, I didn't say this well. The Rabbi Eliezer disagrees because he says there it says asher chata vehevi. Okay, asher chata vehevi. If we look at the last line, the last three lines, mishane hatam, and this is how they resolve this is how they explain Rabbi Eliezer. Why does Rabbi Eliezer in our case think that you need to know exactly why, and in the chata case he thinks not? So Ulla explained because there it says asher chata vehevi. If you sinned, you bring a sacrifice. It doesn't matter what you sinned or that you know exactly what you sinned. If you know you sinned, doesn't matter if you know exactly which sin you did. Because of this, asher chata vehevi. But in our pasuk, it says, right, sheret, behema, chaya, and that fits exactly with the way Chizkiya understood Rabbi Eliezer, that you have to know exactly how you became impure. Now we go to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, what's Rabbi Akiva going to say to that drasha? In other words, why does Rabbi Akiva disagree with Rabbi Eliezer? If we really say in the pasuk, behema, chaya, sheret, so what's Rabbi Akiva going to do with that? And remember, Rabbi Akiva darshans everything, right? Rabbi Akiva is the kind who says every extra word, every et in the pasuk we darshan. So yeah, like why does it say sheret and why does it say behema and why does it say chaya? It's weird, right? It doesn't make any sense. And you would think that Rabbi Akiva would darshan it like Rabbi Eliezer. So starting with our daf now, Rabbi Akiva would say the following. Okay, we're going back now to the beginning of our Masechet. On Daf Zayin, you might remember, you might not remember. We were trying to figure out, okay, how you know. Look quickly back at Daf Zayin. Okay, on Daf Zayin, we had two ways to darshan this. How you know that you need, okay, we're going to see. Okay, I'll start with Rabbi, 6 lines down. Rabbi Omer, Ekrani chaya, behema lama ne'emra. Once it says chaya in the pasuk, what do you need behema for? Now, that's exactly what we're asking. Why do you need behema? Why do you need chaya? Why do you need sheretz? If it's not that, you need to know exactly how you became impure. So Rabbi Akiva is going to say, oh, I go with Rabbi's drasha. What does he say? Well, ne'emar kam behema tme'ah, ve'ne'emar lalam behema tme'ah. Ma lahalan tumat kodesh, av kan tumat kodesh. Okay, so that's how we learn this whole thing about Tumat Kodesh is going to be included. So he needs this drasha for Rebbe, that we have this drasha, Gzera Shava Behema Behema, that's why we need Behema. Therefore, now he's going to say like this, since it already had Nivelav Behema and a Nivelav Chaya, now we have another, then why do you have Sheretz? Well, it also just said Sheretz, because once it was giving right, they go together. So sheretz is not really necessary. And they now say something kind of odd, which is Kidditani debe Rabbi Yishmael, like in the school of Rabbi Yishmael. Now we're explaining Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold by the school of Rabbi Yishmael, right? They all disagree. Remember, Rabbi Akiva darshans every et in the Torah. Well, on this issue particularly, he agrees with Rabbi Yishmael that kol parasha shene'emra v'nishnet lo nishnet ela b'shvil davar shenitchadesh. Okay, we're going to say like this. He darshans like Rabbi Yishmael, that every part, specifically in this case, because he has no explanation otherwise, which is sometimes something's repeated, and it's repeated because we need to learn something new, which is this Gzera Shavav the Be'ema. But it's just for one reason it's here, but there could be added extra words that aren't necessary actually to darshan. Okay, and that's how we explain Rabbi Akiva's approach. So that's how he deals with the sheretz. Why is sheretz there? It's not really necessary. It's just there because we needed the chaya and the be'emah, so we added the sheretz as well. And again, you'd have to say it's a little atypical for Rabbi Akiva, who really thinks that every word in the Torah is gold, and worth darshaning. Now we just go back to that small point about Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua had tried to prove against Rabbi Eliezer in that previous bright, and this is kind of not part of the flow, but Rabbi Eliezer had tried to prove that right? You're not sure which one you did, but you know you did one, you're going to be obligated. To which Rabbi Yeshua said, doesn't it say, Asher Chataba, you have to know the sin, exactly what you did? To which, right, we explained that, he darshans Asher Chatavevi, however you sin, you have to bring it. But the question is, what does he do with that word ba that Rabbi Yeshua darshan to say against him? Rabbi Eliezer, hi ba, my avile. What does he do with that word ba? Well, prat limit asik. He says that word ba comes to say, you have to actually have intended to do the action. Okay, mitasek is a term we know a lot from Masechet Shabbat. And Rashi is going to explain to us here what mitasek is. And actually, there's a bit of a difference of opinion what would be considered mitasek. But Rashi says, let's say I intended to do a permitted action, but it came out not permitted action. Okay, like what? So there were two fruits in front of me, two apples, and it's Shabbat, let's say. And I go to cut the apple. One of them is attached to the tree and one of them is not. And I didn't realize, okay, maybe apple's not a great example because you would kind of realize it was attached, maybe something attached to the ground. Okay, you're cutting something that's attached to the ground. There's one that's attached to the ground, one that's not attached to the ground. Let's say there's potatoes on the ground and you thought the potato was detached already. So you went to cut a detached potato, which is totally a permitted action. But it turns out you went to the wrong one and you cut accidentally the attached one. And that is a forbidden action. But that you wouldn't bring a korban chatat about because you didn't even intend to do a forbidden action. Right? Intending, like, what would be not mitasek? I tried to eat the korban, the chalev. I meant to eat the chalev. I didn't know that it was chalev. So, but I intended this action of eating whatever food it was. Here, I intended to eat something else and accidentally ate, right? Or I intended to cut this one, which is a totally permitted action. I ended up cutting the wrong one. Okay, so that's mitasek. Again, there's all different interpretations of exactly what mitasek is, but the main thing is I didn't even intend to do the action that was actually forbidden. I just was, like chopping on a cutting board. I thought it was just a regular detached item. So that's what he learns with ba. I'm not going to be liable at korban if I didn't. I have to do ba, the action. I had to have intended at least for the action, even though I didn't know that it was a forbidden action. Rabbi Yochanan amar, mashma'ut dorshin ikabenayu. Rabbi Yochanan now has a totally different approach. Until now, we thought that there was a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva about what kind of yediah do I need in the beginning. Do I need to have known how I became tamei? Yes, according to Rabbi Eliezer. No, according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yochanan says, and also Rav Sheshet in a second we're going to see, Mashmo Dorshini Kabenayu. They only disagree about how to darshan the pasuk. They both agree that basically we're going to exclude Tum'ah Mikdash V'Kodashav. There is no sacrifice if you forgot that it was the temple here, or if you forgot that this was sacrificial meat. But they just darshan it a different way in the pasuk. One says, oh, sheretz v'ne'elam. It must be specifically the sheretz is what you forget, meaning that you were tamei. It doesn't specifically mean sheretz. It just uses sheretz as an example for I became tamei. And that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva darshans, it says v'ne'elam, and it's juxtaposed to the word tamei. So it must be you forgot specifically tuma and not tuma mikdash v'kodashah. And that's really the only difference between them is how they darshan the pasuk. But practically speaking, there's no difference. V'chein amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet also agrees. Mashmo dorshan ikabenayu. To Rav Sheshet. Now, how do we know Rav Sheshet? Not because he actually said this, but it's an interesting way to know what Rav Sheshet thought. Machlif to Rabbi Eliezer the Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Akiva the Rabbi Eliezer. Sometimes he says Rabbi Eliezer says it, and they say Rabbi Akiva says it. He would like flip between who said what. Okay, but which one darshan which way? But he would mix it around because it wasn't important enough for him to say exactly who said what, because in the end, they both say the same thing. Okay, and therefore, we have two approaches here. Do they actually disagree or do they agree? Now, we're going to, one second. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next part, which has to do with this part. If we're going to say, like Rabbi Eliezer and like Rabbi Akiva, that Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashah, you're not liable to korban, but you are if you forgot, right? You forgot there was Mikdash, you forgot that this was sacrificial item, and you ate it while you were impure, you're not liable to korban. But if you forgot you were tamei, remember there was a Mikdash, remember this was sacrificial item, and you ate it, but forgetting you were tamei, you bring a korban. So comes Rava with his question. Ba'amine Rava me Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman the following: what if you forgot both that you were tamei and that the mikdash was here, or you forgot that you were tamei and you forgot that this item was a sacrificial item? Okay, so Amarle says what you would have expected. Of course, you're going to be obligated to korban because harei helim tuma biyado v'chayav. You forgot Tumah. Who cares if you also forgot Mikdash? In the end, what obligates you a korban? Forgetting that you were impure. That's what you did. So, of course, you're obligated. To which Rava responds, Adrabah, what I could say the reverse. Harei hele Mikdash biyado v'patur. You have a specific exemption. It's not just you're not obligated to korban. It's that you're exempt from a sacrifice if you forget that the Mikdash was even here. right? It's like such a forgetting, I guess, or something, like you're not even obligated. So the fact that you forgot the mikdash, even though you also forgot you were impure, maybe you have an exemption from a sacrifice. So he throws back the question, Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman doesn't have an answer. Rav Ashi tries to answer the question, but Ravina is going to reject his answer. And in the end, we're really going to be left without an answer to this question. Amar Rav Ashi, Chazina, we check. Imi tuma kaparish, hare helim tuma biyado, v'chayav. If it was from tuma, now, what is this? This is actually a very strange thing. If all you're, and this is why Ravina is going to reject it. So if it doesn't make so much sense to you, don't worry. Ravina is going to say exactly that. But we assess the situation, says Rav Ashi. If I'm in the temple and I forgot I was impure and I forgot there was a temple, and then you say to me, Michelle, did you forget your tameh? And then I immediately leave the area. Well, then that's helim tuma, because what caused me to realize and leave? It's when you told me, you reminded me that I was impure. And imi mikdash, or by the way, it doesn't mean someone told me, it could mean I remembered, right? But then I said, oh, wait, I'm tameh, and I run out of the mikdash, okay? But imi mikdash kaparish, if I say, oh my goodness, I'm in the Beit HaMikdash, or you tell me, do you know the Beit HaMikdash was right here, right? You're in the holy place. And then I say, oh no, and I run out the door, then Helim Mikdash biyado patur. In other words, we look at what caused me to leave the premises. So Amalei Ravina le Rav Ashi. He says, what kind of a ridiculous answer is this? Klum parish me mikdash al mishum tuma. If I left because you reminded me the Beit HaMikdash is here. Well, I can stay in the Beit HaMikdash. I only left because I also knew I was impure. In other words, I had to remember both in order to actually leave. So you can't say it was the Mikdash that caused me to leave. It was also my Tumah that caused me to leave. And you could say the reverse in the other case. Kum parish mi Tumah l'mishum Mikdash. When I remembered I was impure and I left, well, only because I also remembered, obviously, that I was in the Beit HaMikdash. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left. So Ela lo shna, so that doesn't really help. And therefore, we're left without an answer to this question. Now we get to a favorite case of the rabbis. The rabbis love suffix cases of doubt. So now, and one of the cases of doubt that they love to discuss is the Shnei Shvilim case. There's two paths. One path, we know that there's a dead body buried in one of the paths. We don't know which path. So if you walk through that path, you're going to become impure, but we don't know which one. Is it A or B? So we have path A, path B. One has a dead body. We don't know which one. So we're going to have two cases with Shnei Shvilim now. Shnei Shvilim, echad tameh ve'echad tahor. And by the way, this is all going to get back to what kind of knowledge is necessary. I told you that's a topic sentence for our Shiur today. What kind of knowledge is necessary for me to be obligated to korban? So now we're back to the tumah. We're not talking about tumah, forgot about mikdash, forgot about kodashim. We're talking about I forgot I was tameh. So in this case, I walked on two paths, right? So there's one tameh, one tahor. Halach barishon. I went first through the first path, path A. So now I'm suffix. I became tameh. We don't know if for sure or not. V'lo nichnas. Now I haven't yet gone into the temple. Then I go on path B. Okay, basheni. V'nichnas. And now I go into the temple. So I pass through path A. I pass through path B. Now I know for sure I'm tameh, right? It's just a matter of, was I tameh when I went on path A? Was I tameh when I went on path B? But either way, I was tameh. I now forget completely, and I go into the temple. Chayav, I'm obligated. Okay, this makes sense because no matter what, I went through tuma. I was impure. I now forgot. I went into the temple. Halach barishon v'nichnas. Okay, case 2. I went through the first path, v'nichnas, and then I went into the temple. Then hizav v'shana v'taval. Now I knew I went through this path that may be impure. Then I forgot. Okay. But then when I realize, I say, you know what? I better get out of this tumah situation. So I do the whole para aduma process. I sprinkle me hizav v'shana. We do it twice on day 3, day 7. That's how you do the purification. Taval, I went to the mikveh. So if I was impure, I'm now not impure. And maybe I went into the temple impure, we don't know, 50-50 chance. Now I go through path B, v'nichnas. Now again, when I go into the temple, 50-50 chance that I was impure. I don't know for sure I was impure because I know for sure at some point I was impure and went into the temple, either the first time or the second time. But each time I went in, right, I didn't know for sure when I went in, even though I obviously forgot, but I didn't even know for sure beforehand that I had gone into the temple, that I was impure, because when I went on path A, maybe I was impure, maybe I wasn't. When I went on path B, I already purified from the first time, right? As opposed to the first case where I didn't become pure in the middle. So I was definitely tamei, right? By the time I went in the second time, I was clearly tamei in case number one, either the first path or from the second path. This time, every time I went into the temple, it was kind of with a safek yediyah in the beginning, okay? But yet, comes Tanakama and says, Chaya, okay? I'm anyway obligated because in the end, I went into the temple one of the times and I was impure. We're going to have to go back to this and understand it better because really it doesn't make so much sense because each time I didn't have a complete yediyah in the beginning, right? Each time, maybe I was impure, right? I didn't know for sure I was impure at any point, okay? Only in hindsight can I look back and say, okay, at some point I was in the temple impure, but the yediyah is kind of missing something. Rabbi Shimon, we're going to have three opinions here. Rabbi Shimon Poter, you can look at the study guide. There's a chart. Okay, maybe I'll pull it up right now. Okay, so here's the chart. Tanakama says both cases I'm going to be obligated. Okay, now, Rabbi Shimon Poter. Rabbi Shimon exempts, but only in case two, because of what I just said. Okay, in case one, he's going to obligate just like the rabbis, because clearly I went into the temple. Okay, we're going to get to, there's some details here in the, right now we're only dealing with what's in red, because that's the stuff that's the Tannaitic source. After it's going to be the Gemara talking about it. Now, Rabbi Shimon, in case two, says, no, it was suffic. Each time I didn't know, I never had a clear idea that I was impure. And therefore, even though I went into the temple and I was definitely impure one of the times, I'm missing what's necessary, which is a yediyah that I was impure. I need to have known that I was impure before I went in to be obligated. And I didn't know because each time it was a 50-50 chance. Now we have Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda who explains Rabbi Shimon. So we have two versions of Rabbi Shimon. This happens a lot. We've had it a bunch recently. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda poter b'kulam mishum Rabbi Shimon. He says all the cases Rabbi Shimon exempted, to which the Gemara says b'kulan, okay, turning out amabet, ba'filu b'kamaita, even in case one, that makes no sense. Miman of shachtamehu, in case number one, where I went in the first path, and then I went in the second path, and then I went into the temple, for sure I was impure, right? So how I definitely went into the temple and I was impure. And I had knowledge because when I went on that second path, I knew that I had gone on the first path also. So at that point, I know that I was either became Tameh now or I became Tameh earlier. So if I knew, then it doesn't make any sense that I wouldn't bring a korban. So to explain that opinion, which really doesn't make any sense, Rava explains that the Mishnah, actually, the first case is a little bit different than we thought. It's still the case, but it's a hacha b'mayaskina. What exactly is the case? Kigon shalach b'rishon. Okay, I go that first path. Ubisha'ah shalach b'sheni. When I went on the second path, then shachach shahalach b'rishon. Ah, what's the problem? When I went on the second path, I already forgot that I had gone on path A. So at that point, I don't have a complete idea. I don't know for sure that I'm Tameh right now because I forgot it that I went on the first path. If I remembered I went on path A, and when I go on path B and then I go into the temple, I clearly, before I went into the temple, there was at some point I had knowledge that I was definitely impure. But if I already forgot about case A, right, path A, and when I go on path B, it's again then it's a knowledge now. There's no suffix idea here, okay? But this is what the Gemara is going to call the Havile Miktzat Yediyah. I only have partial knowledge. That in the end, I was definitely impure. The problem is, at every given point, I didn't know for sure that I was impure. Each time I thought I was suffix. So that's only partial knowledge because each time I wasn't sure that I was tamei, even though I actually was. So it's not a suffix, it's not a doubt, but it's partial because when I went on path B, I didn't remember path A. So it's only part of the knowledge. And that's the machloket between Rabbi Shimon version 1 and Rabbi Shimon version 2. Because the Ubahakami Palge, Tanakama Savar, Amrina Mitzat Yediyah Kekol Yediyah. For Rabbi Shimon, okay, this is confusing. It's not Tanakama. It's Tanakama is the first Tana who explained Rabbi Shimon. We have two versions of Rabbi Shimon. So we're only going to get back to the real Tana Kama, right? The first opinion in our Mishnah in a minute. But right now, first they deal with it as what happened was they first asked, the most confusing thing in this Mishnah was Rabbi Shimon in Ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shimon in case one. So that's where they started, and we're working our way backwards. So what's the debate in case one between Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shimon? Whether partial knowledge, right? When we know for sure you became impure at some point, and you knew then that maybe you were impure, and you knew that maybe you were impure, and if you put the two together, you would get it complete. You were definitely impure. However, since at each given moment you only saw part of the picture, that's why we call it miktzat yediyah, is that as if you knew you were impure? Because in the end, if you put A and B together at some point, right, you should have known you were impure. Or did we say, no, we don't view it that way? Miktzat yediyah is not. You need, and again, this is why I said our daf is all about what kind of knowledge do I need? Do I need a really clear knowledge, right? Originally, we talked about in the beginning of the daf, do I need to know how I became impure? Now the question is, do I need to know 100% that I was impure at that moment? Or is it enough that if you put two and two together, you'll get the fact that at some point I knew I was impure? So that's the machloket. So again, Tanakama says mitzat yediyah kol yediyah. Rabbi Shimon, and as again, Tanakama means the first version of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon, according to the second version, savar lo amrina mitzat yediyah ki kol yediyah. Okay, we don't say that, and that's why you're exempt even in case number one. Now we have to go back to the first opinion. Halach b'rishon v'nichnas, and it's really right. What's difficult in the first opinion is the second case, because the first case is pretty obvious. In the end, I went over a place that was tamei. It doesn't matter, right, whether I have partial yediyah or not. In the end, I was definitely tamei when I entered the temple, and at some point, I knew, when I went on path A, I knew I went on path A. When I went on path B, I knew I went on path B. Either which way, there's some sort of knowledge that I was definitely impure, and there was a knowledge that I was through this area. So we're going to make me obligated. But halach b'rishon v'nichnas, yizav v'shana v'tava, halach v'chazar v'halach v'shani v'nichnas, chayav, Rabbi Shimon poter. So now we have this machloket in case two. If I became pure in the middle, and the second case, then really, it doesn't really make sense on my chayav. Why do the rabbis, the Tanakama, obligate you? Safek yediyahu. Each time I went into the temple, before when I went on the path, it was actually a 50-50 chance that I was impure, right? Because I purified myself in the middle. We can't say in the end, right, I knew I was impure when I went in because at some point I was clearly impure. Each time I went into the temple, because I went in twice, it was a maybe I'm impure before I thought. And the other one I said, maybe I'm impure. That's not a yediyah, that's a suffix yediyah. How on earth could Tanakama obligate? So here we're going to have a machloket, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, how to understand. And then we're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, what they say here, contradicts what they say somewhere else. And I'm going to pull up the chart again so you can see. So the way Rabbi Yochanan, right now, they're just trying to explain the original Tanakama's opinion and why he obligates in case two. So I'm a Rabbi Yochanan. Kan asu safek yediyah ki yediyah. This is an exception where they basically said, since in the end we know that you went into the temple at some point, you were impure, we're going to view, now this is like the rabbis came along and said, we're going to basically view, even though by Torah this wouldn't be a yediyah, we're going to call a safek yediyah an actual yediyah. This is also like saying, it's not so critical that you understand things, that you really had a complete knowledge. It's enough that you just have partial knowledge. Okay, later we'll see where he gets this from the pasuk. Okay, when we resolve the contradiction, we're gonna see where he gets this. But he's basically gonna say the idea that you need before to be obligated is not a safek idea is enough. Okay, it's enough to just, again, only when you definitely did something, right? Because in this case you went on two paths. So having a suffix about whether the truth is no. In the end, right. In the end, we know that you went into the temple impure, and that's why you're going to be obligated korban. The only weakness is that each time you went through that path, you weren't sure, right, whether you became impure or not. So your idea is a little bit missing something, even though your action is either the first time or the second time you went impure into the temple. So we're going to call that yediyah anyway. Rish Lakish, and the main thing we're going to say about Rish Lakish is he didn't accept this opinion. So he obviously doesn't think, even though he doesn't say this, he doesn't think that Safek Yediyah is like Yediyah. Okay, he thinks Safek Yediyah doesn't count. However, what does he say? Hamane Rabbi Yishmael. How do we explain Tanakama's position? Oh, this Tanakama, it's Rabbi Yishmael. What does Rabbi Yishmael say? We've learned this before. Damar lo be'inin Yediyah b'tchila. Rabbi Yishmael thinks that you don't even need to have knowledge before. Rabbi Yishmael thinks that case of Ola Yored and our Tumat Mikdash B'Kodashav that we keep saying is unique because you need a Yediyah before and Yediyah after. And we learned that from Ne'elam Mimenu. Remember, we had two ways of darshaning that Ne'elam Mimenu. So because we have Ne'elam Mimenu, meaning you forgot, it means you must have known before. Rabbi Yishmael says no. Ne'elam and Ne'elam, remember, that's what we learned in the Mishnah today. I went back. So Ne'elam, one is for Tumat Mikdash, one is for Tumat Kodashav, right? Helen Mikdash, Helen Kodshim. So you forgot the Mikdash, you forgot the Kodshim. Ne'elam is not free for a drasha for Rabbi Yishmael. So he doesn't think that you need the Yediyah beforehand. And that's why we don't care if it's a Safek Yediyah, because you don't even need a Yediyah, okay? If you really needed knowledge, Safek Yediyah wouldn't work according to Rish Lakish. Now, this is why I bolded it in the chart. The key to come out of this, which is going to create this contradiction we're going to see, is that according to Rabbi Yochanan, Safek Yediyah is a Yediyah. According to Rish Lakish, it's not. And that contradicts what they say elsewhere. Rami to Rabbi Yochanan, but Rami to Rish Lakish, to Rish Lakish. They each contradict themselves. Tanya. In a different case, and now we're comparing this to a case, not an Ola Yored korban, but a regular chatat, like I ate chelev, okay, and I have to bring a korban chatat. Now, in this case, achalti safek chelev vinoda. Okay, it's a braita. I ate safek chelev, meaning I ate a piece of fat. Wasn't clear if it was the forbidden fat or permitted fat. Now, I didn't even realize that there was a doubt about this. I just ate it. Then, noda. Somebody says, do you know that might be chelev? Now, they didn't say it's definitely chelev. It might be chelev. What do I have to do generally? I bring a korban asham talui. That's the one that kind of the hanging guilt offering that until such time I figure out what I actually did, right? That gives me atonement. And at the end, if I find out eventually somebody says, oh, it really was chelev, I have to bring a regular sin offering, a chata. But what if I ate this safek chelev? Then you told me, that might have been chelev you ate. And then again, I ate safek chelev, vinoda. The question is, do I bring two asham taluis or only one? Now, comes Rabbi and says, Rabbi Omer, kashem shemavi chatat kol echad, just like I'd have to bring a korban chatat on each one, because now, I really don't want to explain Rabbi because Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are going to explain it in two different ways. So I'm going to leave Rabbi for a minute. But he says, just like I'm obligated chatat on each one, because when you have like a yediyah in the middle and then you do it again, you be chayav. So, kach maybe asham talu el kol echad. You're going to have to bring two separate asham talus. That's what's going to interest us, this line of Rabbi. And we're going to have two explanations for Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish about this line of Rabbi. But now we're just going to finish that braita and go off with something that's not so important for our purposes. But Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Amru Mishum Rabbi Shimon, if they both say in the name of Rabbi Shimon that no, you don't bring two asham taluis because of a drasha in the pasuk. Eino mivi el asham talu yechad. You're only going to bring one asham talu. Why is that? Shenemal. Okay, this is the pasuk about a korban asham. You bring an asham talui. Al shigigato asher shagag. On a shkagan, an unwitting act that you did unwittingly. Now, there's obviously extra words in that pasuk. If you say shigigato, it's obvious asher shagag. That's what a shigigato is. So they darshan haTorah ribtash shigagot harbe v'asham talui echad. The pasuk talks about one korban asham, and it mentions multiple shkagot. So if I ate something, and I'm not sure if I ate something that was forbidden, and first of all, I had no idea there was anything wrong. Then someone told me, it was forbidden, maybe, right? And then it happens again, and I hadn't brought the first Asham Talui yet. Then I bring one Asham Talui, because one Asham Talui can cover multiple shkagot. Okay, like I said, that opinion doesn't interest us, but we want to understand Rabbi. What was he comparing? What chatat was he comparing to the Asham Talui? So there's two possibilities. I'm a Rish Lakish. Kan shana Rabbi yidiot sfekot mechalkot lechataot. Okay, what does that mean? It's hard to understand. What he's saying is, this asham talui on eating these two, right? I ate it. I wasn't sure. I didn't know anything. Then they told me, it might have been chelev. Now, and then I do it again. When I eventually find out that I ate it, okay, that I definitely ate chelev, I have to bring how many korbanot chatat in this case? So according to Rish Lakish, I'd have to bring 2 korbanot chatat. Why? Now, here comes the key. Because there were 2 knowledges, right? There were 2 times first, and after the first thing you said, do you know that might have been chaylev? And then after the second time, you said, do you know that might have been chaylev? Now, because there were 2 yediot, okay, 2 knowledges, even though they were, this is the key, suffix knowledges. I wasn't sure, right? At that point, it was only a suffix. But because there was a break in between those 2 actions and there was some sort of knowledge in the middle, so therefore, if in the end I find out I have to bring, I definitely ate, both were chaylev, I'd have to bring 2 separate korbanot. And just like I'd have to bring 2 separate korbanot in that case, I obviously then have to bring 2 asham taluis. So that means that Rish Lakish holds, okay, let's go back to our chart. Rish Lakish holds that Safek Yediyah is a Yediyah, because here he thinks, even though I found out in the middle, maybe I ate, we count as a Yediyah for a korban, regular korban chata. So that's Rish Lakish, and that contradicts the first part, because he said, oh, there must be no need for Yediyah. It must be Rabbi Yishmael's approach, because if it was Safek Yediyah, that wouldn't be called a Yediyah. And Rabbi Yochanan says, he doesn't agree with Rish Lakish. Why doesn't he agree with Rish Lakish? Because he doesn't think Safek Yediyah would be Yediyah. He actually thinks, okay, and we're going to see because he explains it differently, Rabbi, the fact that he doesn't adopt Rish Lakish's approach must mean he doesn't think that in that case you'd have to bring 2, because each time it was just a Safek knowledge in the middle. So what does he say? Kashem sheyediyot vaday ba'alma mitchakot lechataot, kach yediyot Safek mitchakot la'ashamot. In a regular korban chatat, this is what I said. If I ate chaylev and then I didn't realize, and then you tell me, Michelle, you ate chaylev, and then I eat again a piece of chaylev, and you say, Michelle, you ate chaylev, I would have to bring 2 korbanot chatat. So basically, what Rabbi Yochanan says is, since I'd have to bring 2 korbanot chatat in a regular case, not in this case. In this case, they were safek yediyah in the middle. If eventually I find out I ate the chaylev, I only have to bring 1 because it was 1 knowledge at the end that I definitely ate chaylev. But since in a regular korban chatat, I would need to give separate korbanot. Likewise, since I had 2 yediot of maybe you ate, each yediyah obligates me an asham talui. So he makes the comparison there, and the reason he makes that comparison and not the Rish Lakish one must be because he doesn't think that Safek Yediyah is Yediyah. So now we have a complete crossover of their opinions in the previous. So now we're going to answer it pretty simply. Bishlamad Rabbi Yochanan lo kashya. Kan asu v'lo b'kol Torah kula asu. Now, what's really at this is that we're comparing apples and oranges. In the first case of the Shnei Shvilin, what Yediyah are we talking about? The Yediyah before. And in the case of Chatat, in the Safek Chaylev, we're talking about finding out that I did something wrong. Those are 2 very different things. And notice what Rabbi Yochanan said when he explained the first case. Kan asu Safek Yediyah. In this case specifically, of the knowledge before the action that's necessary for the korban olah v'yored, then we say Safek Yediyah is enough. Because Hacha hu delo k'tiva Yediyah behedya, because it doesn't actually say Yediyah in the pasuk. Remember, how do we learn it? It says, because you forgot, right? It eluded you. So it never really, and we said, from there must be Yediyah, but it never said in the Torah, you need a Yediyah. So since it never said in the Torah the word Yediyah, we'll be lenient and we'll say Safek is a Yediyah. But, well, I don't know if it's lenient, but we'll be lenient with our definition of what kind of Yediyah you need. But, in a regular korban chatat, after, right, the after I found out that I did it, there, dichtiv o hoda elav, or you knew, right, when you know you did it. Now there it says yediyah, and therefore yediyah mal yatabiyin, you need an actual real knowledge. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan distinguishes. And again, in the Olah v'yored of that, the yediyah beforehand, it never says it in the Torah explicitly, it's learned out by drasha, will be more loose in the definition. Safek Yediyah is enough. Because again, in the end, I definitely did the action. It's just the Yediyah that's weak in the beginning. So we can say it. But when I find out that I did something wrong, that has to be a definitive when it's after the fact. Because the Torah says so. Now we get to Rish Lakish. Now it's a little more complicated. El Rish Lakish, Ademokin like Rabbi Yishmael, no Rabbi. Why did Rish Lakish have to say this is like Rabbi Yishmael? You don't need Yediyah Tchila. Could have said it's Yediyah Tchila, and if he holds that Safek Yediyah is Yediyah, then for sure he'll hold it like Rabbi Yochanan did, that Safek Yediyah for sure in the beginning is, if even in the end it works, right? When I finally find out that I did it, we could say Safek Yediyah counted and I bring 2 korbanot in that case. when you told me in the middle, maybe you did something wrong, and then you told me again, maybe you did something wrong, separate korban. Of course, we're going to say it works here. So why did you say like Rabbi Yishmael? The answer is simple. Ha kamashmalan to Rabbi Yishmael lo ba'yidiyah b'tchila. He could have actually said, like we said, like Rabbi Yochanan said. He could have. He could have explained Rabbi's thing about kana susafek yakidiyah. Could have said that, but he didn't do that because he wanted to teach you this unique shita of Rabbi Yishmael that you don't need yidiyah in the beginning. That's why he said it. Okay? Meaning it's not necessarily what he holds. He just wanted you to know Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. So the Gemara says, Pshita de lo bai, midelo miyatre lekrat. Right? The pasuk v'ne'elam d'mechayev al halei mikdash. We know already what Rabbi Yishmael holds because Rabbi Yishmael doesn't have. He uses v'ne'elam for other things. He can't use v'ne'elam to teach you that you need a yediyah b'tchila. So obviously he holds you don't need a yediyah b'tchila. So why do we need Rish Lakish? Why does Rish Lakish feel this need to tell us what Rabbi Yishmael holds? To which the answer, well, ma'u d'tema kileit le'mikai aval migamar it le'kamashmalan. It's a very interesting answer. They say maybe he doesn't learn it from the pasuk, but maybe he has a tradition about it. And this makes sense in light of everything we learned, that we've been talking forever about this yediyah b'tchila, and then all of a sudden we find out, wait, Rabbi Yishmael doesn't require that? What do you mean? Isn't that like a basic? So you might have thought that Rabbi Yishmael actually does learn it, he just doesn't learn it from the psukim, he has a tradition about it. Comes Rish Lakish to tell you, no, Rabbi Yishmael really doesn't require yediyah b'tchila at all. He wants to make sure that you know that, and that's why he said it, but not that it's his approach, and not that he thinks that this, the miktzat yediyah, right? I'm sorry, the safek yediyah, right, is not yediyah. No, he thinks safek yediyah is yediyah. He could have said like Rabbi Yochanan, but he only said it to tell you should know that Rabbi Yishmael holds this way, and therefore claims maybe the Tanakama holds like Rabbi Yishmael. And with that, Hadran alach yediyah tuma. We finished the second parak. We'll start with the Mishnah of the next parak, and then we'll start with the Gemara in tomorrow's class. Shevuot Shtein Shein Arba. We finally get to Shevuot now. Okay, it took us 2 chapters of Yediyah Batuma. Now we're back to our first line of our Masechet, and in fact they repeat it. This, by the way, happens in Sanhedrin also. Dina Mamanot B'Shlosha, and then the 3rd chapter starts also Dina Mamanot B'Shlosha. Shevuot Shtein Shein Arba. Shevuah she'ochal v'shelo ochal. I will eat or I won't eat. Shachalti v'shelo ochalti, or I ate. I took an oath that I ate, previously, or I didn't eat. Shevuah shelo ochal ve'achal kol shu chayav. Now we have a debate about the shevuah shelo ochal. I say, I swear I didn't eat. And then I ate a teeny bit. Now, we know with eating, there's usually a requisite amount. But here, I didn't eat a requisite amount. Well, Rabbi Akiva says chayav. Amrlo to Rabbi Akiva, hechamatzinu b'ochel kol shu chayav, shezeh chayav. How could you obligate this person? We never have. On eating, there's always a requisite amount, like a kazayit, or, there's different amounts for different things. Usually it's a kazayit. Amar lam Rabbi Akiva, maybe korban, maybe korban. Rabbi Akiva says, where did we find a case where somebody speaks and they have to bring a korban? This is like a very unique situation, that your speech could obligate you a korban. Therefore, just like it could obligate you a korban, it could obligate you in no requisite amount, okay? And even eating a teeny bit. This in of itself is an interesting line, okay? Rashi basically explains that it's not an isur achila. It's an isur that you went against your word. And by eating any little amount, you went against your word. That's one way to look at it. Tosfot and Daf Kaf Aleph has a different approach. He said, because it's a unique situation that you're obligated for speech, it must be more stringent. Because it's more stringent, we're going to chayiv you even on no requisite amount. So it doesn't have to do with specifically dibur versus achila. It's that we're going to be more strict with you because it's a unique situation where usually you're not obligated to korban for speech. Here you are. It's just a very interesting machloket. You can delve into a little bit more in terms of thinking what that, the meaning of that machloket. So let's review our daf. We started with this Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva. Do they really have a machloket or do they not have a machloket? Is it just a different way of darshan the pasuk? We have this question. Once we say there's no helen mikdash or kodashav, you're not obligated to korban. What if you have both? Does it exempt you, or does the fact that you forgot tuma also obligate you? We didn't end up with an answer. Then we got to the Shnei Shvilim case with the 3 different opinions. We analyzed the different opinions. Then when we explained the Tanakama, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish had different approaches to it, which affected how they view safek yediyah, which then contradicted what they said in a different braita about safek yediyah. But in the end, right, either we say we're comparing apples and oranges, right? Yediyah before is not the same as yediyah itself. That's how we reconcile Rabbi Yochanan. We reconcile Rish Lakish by saying he was just trying to teach us something else about Rabbi Yishmael. to know that Rabbi Shmuel has this unique approach. And then we started with the Shevuot Shem Shem Arba and got into this discussion, is there a requisite amount or not for eating to go against your oath? With that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a good day.